You are listening to the Wild Man Podcast.
All right. Thank you for choosing the Wild Man podcast. Today, my interview is with Guy from the Red Chord.
Hello.
How are you doing today, boss?
Good. No complaints.
Uh, my first question for you is, I know you guys started in '99, correct?
Yeah.
How did you guys feel like since from '99 till now? How do you think musically everything has evolved for you guys and like music in general?
Uh, let's see. I mean, so when we started, we kind of just had a concept that we wanted to roll with, and it was through the eyes of a bunch of, 18, 19-year-old kids that were just trying to find like what we wanted to do. So it was sort of a novel concept at the time of just being like, oh, we kind of want to be death metal and we want to be like, we like metalcore and we like hardcore. And I wonder if there's a way for us to kind of put it together and have it be more death metal facing than, uh, I mean, it's not like there weren't like predecessors that were combining styles. It was just that, Converge was around, and Dying Fetus was around, and Skinless was around, and Internal Bleeding and Suffocation were around, but like none of them were really uh, doing it in quite the way that we had in mind. We wanted it to be like a death metal band that could play a metalcore show, and we liked the aspects of doing like sing-alongs and things like that, and capturing that energy of like the VFW Hall hardcore shows. As time went on, it was I think like the beginning was more like a proof of concept, like when we did the first the Fused Together record, and like that record was just like a compilation of everything that we'd sort of done to that point. And as time went on, there were less restrictions. It was less about like, okay, we have to try to figure out our identity, and more like, okay, this is we got better at being the Red Chord. We got better at being braver. There was very few rules. We threw an instrumental kind of progressive jam on each record, and you could see like a lot of Gunface in particular, Mike McKenzie. He I think his style really kind of came into its own. Where I mean, he's a guy that was self-taught, plays his guitar. He's a right-handed person that plays his guitar upside down because he learned incorrectly, and he strums up because that was what he did. And he definitely has like a very eclectic musical background in terms of like listening to a lot of like extreme death metal, but then a lot of like other just bizarro music and a lot of even like classical rock and stuff that was like very uh, almost like Guitar Hero type driven. And I felt like over time, especially towards the end of like when we did the Teeth Machine record, Gunface's leads really kind of came into their own. His like personality really shined through in his songwriting.
Oh yeah, because I know like you guys with you guys being around like in the beginning of like in a sense the deathcore phase, you guys got mixed up with the deathcore phase. Like you guys and Despise started the movement of mixing genres together as a whole.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of bands that were kind of in that conversation. I remember I met Alex, the singer of Despised. I met him, and he was actually drumming for a different band. And so one of the bands that's kind of in that conversation of just like weirdo. It wasn't necessarily like short hair facing, but like Cephalic Carnage was a predecessor of ours. They started a couple years before. They were already busy and on the road. They weren't really doing what we were trying to do because they were just clearly more just like they were very much death metal, very much like strange, and they had these like spastic sort of parts, and they're definitely an interesting counterpart for us. But Cephalic Carnage took a band called Neuraxis on tour. Neuraxis did a album on Willowtip and some other stuff. and Alex from Despise was drumming for Neuraxis at the time. He's a hell of a drummer. And I remember him, I gave him like our like 3 song demo, like cassette. I gave some to Cephalic, I gave some to Alex, and like we started, and then at one point he started telling me about like how he was doing this Despise project. And I think that Despised originally started out being like a little bit more death metal, and then kind of heard a couple things, and they were trying to change it up a little bit. And when they did like that, that first century media record with like bulletproof scales and stuff on it, like I think that they really, um, I think that they really like streamlined that sound, that like deathcore sound, and they did a little bit more in your face than we were trying to do, because we never wanted to do the like Suicide Silence had a good sound going, like they were a little bit later, but it was like, blast, 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 slam, like, like it was all, it wasn't so much, I don't think that they were trying to be progressive or anything. They just had that like raw deathcore sort of thing going on. And Despised Icon, I feel like was like, they really streamlined it on that first century media record. That was an album that, like, in my head when I did my label and stuff like that, I remember being like, I really should have pursued these guys. I would have loved to have put this out, just because I listened to that so much when it came out, and it was pretty awesome.
Well, yeah, like you see, because you've seen music like generally evolve from like the beginnings of like a lot of like small time bands that are like huge. Like you guys are definitely one of the biggest influences for a lot of bands now.
I mean, I don't know if they know that I think that we influenced like a band that might have influenced them. Like, uh, I was kind of comparing this the other day. A lot of people like Noctilus is obviously a huge band at this point. Like they're really way up the top of the food chain. And when I listen to a band like Noctilus, there's some of their riffs that remind me of Entombed. Entombed is, way predecessor, Earache days, whatever, Wolverine Blues, all that other stuff, going back to like, being played on Headbangers Ball and Beavis and Butthead and all that stuff. And when I hear Knocked Loose, I'm like, oh wow, they take a lot of influence in their guitar tone from like Entombed and whatever. And then I kind of get thinking, and I'm like, I don't know that they've ever really listened to Entombed. So it's like Entombed influences Hatebreed in the very, very beginning, and if Hatebreed influences somebody else, and influences Motionless and White or something like that. So I don't know the Knocked Loose guys, but I have a feeling that it's like Red Chord kind of has that going on, where we influenced somebody back in the day, maybe, which, I mean, whatever. We're still a relatively underground band that just happen to do some cool, bigger things here and there. But yeah, I mean, if you ask some of these like big bands, like I don't know that we'd be like their, I think that we were just like a little bit too early on, because I mean, a lot of these guys are the same age that when we started. Like we were, 19, 20, 18, 19, 20, like whatever. We're getting on the road at, 20, 21. A lot of these bands are doing the exact same thing now. So it's like, they're 20 years old. They just weren't around in, our heyday.
Oh yeah, like I feel like with brutal death metal now, it's more opened up. If this makes sense, opened up the door. Like you can express how you feel now. Like you have bands like sanguisugabogg, 200 Stab Wounds, and stuff like that. They're picking up the old style way.
Yeah, I mean, I had a conversation. I like the Sanguisugabogg guys a lot. We played a show, our first show back from our little hiatus, whatever, 7 year hiatus back in 2022. We played the Decibel Philly Fest, excuse me, and Sanguisugabogg was like one of the earlier bands that played on the show, and we ended up like kind of just exchanging contact and staying in touch with them. Devin reminds me so much of Trevor from Black Dahlia, in the respect that Trevor was a guy that just like absolutely worshipped all forms of just underground brutal death metal, and he was always like so far ahead of the curve in terms of just knowing all of these bands. Like you know, Mike from Red Chord and I were talking, and like every once in a while, like we'll start hearing about some underground band, and then like we'll go to Adam on like Instagram or Facebook, and it'll say like, oh, mutual friend Trevor. So Trevor was like so many years ahead of us, even to this day, on like discovering all this underground music. To me, like Devin is somebody that's kind of like come up in that sort of thinking where he he just like he'll like be talking to me about like some of the excitement that he has for some of these like old school bands that were around like when I was a kid or like in our early days of playing. And it's funny because like these bands were not significant at the time. Like um there was always somebody out there. There was always somebody trying to put together some, Death Fest or something like that. And it was not the way that Maryland Death Fest is now. Like you'd stack 15 bands from all over the place, and you might have outside of Milwaukee Metal Fest was the only one that was really, I think, having a lot of success. All these other ones, or you were throwing 15 extreme death metal bands, like you might pull 200 people together. Um, and it's funny because like Devin, like when I saw him at the sanguisugabogg at New England Metal Fest very recently, like 2 weeks ago, like dude's wearing like a Mortal Decay shirt, and he loves Eternal Suffering and Dripping and stuff. And like, these are bands that like we really liked as kids, but like we play shows with them and stuff. And there were not very many people there. They were underground at the time. I did a show for Devin was singing for Dripping, and it's like I did one of the very rare Dripping shows back in the very earliest part of like Red Chord, and I booked a local YMCA in my hometown. And I had Eternal Suffering and Dripping and the Year of Our Lord and or something like that. I think, and, there might have been 50 or 100 people there, and it was primarily a lot of those people were just coming out because of us and other local bands. And I mean, I'm so excited that it happened. I loved Eternal Suffering, and I loved, like bands like Dripping, and I was happy to be a part of that sort of scene and trying to like get people in our area exposed to other non metal hardcore bands, or like metallic hardcore bands and stuff, because there was a lot of that stuff going on. We just wanted to like be like, hey, yeah, yeah, have you ever heard of death metal? Do you like death metal? Like, yeah, you want to consider death metal? Like, um, so yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see like this like resurgence of these new bands like, and they're successfully doing it. Like Sanguisugabogg is like a more younger facing successful version of like, yeah, I think they're better than Mortician, but like they kind of like capitalized on that sound, and they have way more success than Mortician ever did, because the shows from back in the day were never popular like they are right now.
Oh yeah, like I tell a lot of people, like I love discovering the underground bands because like you never know who you're gonna find and seeing being successful because like I don't mind the mainstream like bands here and there, but I love like digging on the Metal Archives website. You could be on that website for hours just finding new bands, and they're just not like how come I've never heard of them? And it's just like it's because no one knows about them yet, and you're just like, oh, I found that good band.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, and there's other bands there's so many bands that were like in the conversation that we looked up to back in the day. Dying Fetus is obviously a huge one, and it's amazing that they're still out there and doing very well. Cryptopsy, but they just, Cryptopsy was like a really awesome extreme death metal band. They just weren't really resonating with like the metalcore, hardcore kids, but they're amazing and they were around before we were. Skinless, the same thing. They had like the stompy in my head, like, Skinless and like the slam bands like Internal Bleeding or Pyrexia or whatever, like that to me in my head was like deathcore. But because it was basically just death metal with mosh parts. But then you realize like, okay, they had a lot of success, or they were having success within the death metal world, and they were not resonating with like that early, I don't know, like Poison the Well, or they wouldn't be able to like necessarily go out and play like an Earth Crisis show during that thing, or a Vision of Disorder show. They just wouldn't have really gone over. Maybe in New England they would have, or maybe in New Jersey, but like I don't think the rest of the country was like quite as open-minded as that. Uh, I mean, Suffocation is obviously one of our biggest influences, and they're like one of the starters of that whole thing. In my head, it's like I couldn't like if I was explaining to like a hardcore kid, like you got to hear this is a brutal breakdown, like and it'd just be like, oh, okay, yeah, but they wanted the sing-alongs, they wanted the like, they wanted the they just wanted a different lyrical thing. They didn't want to hear about people getting their heads cut off or whatever. And
Yeah, I definitely love talking to the Pyrexia guy, Chris Basil.
okay.
And like me and him always talk about like death metal has always been like like I use it as death metal has always been that bastard child that no one liked until it got big.
Oh, I mean, people in death metal, like, I mean, when you talk death metal, like, death metal has probably the most loyal scene that there was. And the people that were into death metal back in the day, I mean, in some of these bands, like, there was definitely a heyday of like some of these bands like Cannibal Corpse and Death and Suffocation coming up, where they definitely had some success, like, alongside, like, as Pantera got big, as Sepultura got big, as all of that like mid '90s or early mid '90s like Roadrunner and major labels dipping their toes in or whatever. I think that like death metal definitely benefited from that. It's very similar to the way that like at this point, like Lamb of God and Slipknot and Knocked Loose and Kubla Khan, like rising tide is going to raise all ships. And I think that like the fact that these bands they're taking out these smaller bands and you're turning heads, and then like you kind of get that like you get these like eye-opening moments for like these really young influential kids saying like, oh wow, I'm 15, that was the heaviest thing I'd ever heard, I didn't know about this. And like the fact that like Lorna Shore sounds the way that they do, and they're doing as well as they're doing, like that stands that is a huge benefit for every underground extreme band, because there's going to be somebody that is going to go out and do the same thing that all the metal people used to do, where they're going to get into it, they're going to collect everything, and they're going to seek out everything, and they're going to like just like want more and more and more and more. um and I think that the metal fans have always been extremely loyal and extremely devoted and extremely like has definitely always been that. And
Oh,
as soon as that light switch goes off.
oh yeah, I remember the first time I ever like listened to metal. Like I think it was like Slipknot's first self-titled album because I didn't have like the internet, so like I got handed CDs. And like you said, the light switch turned on, and like I just kept exploring, and like you go down a rabbit hole and you find so much bands.
Yeah, I mean, and Slipknot was Slipknot's been very good about I mean, even like 2008, we were on that Mayhem Fest tour that they did, and like Slipknot was the headliner, and like those guys have always been very good to their support bands. They've always been like pretty open-minded of it not just being like obviously Slipknot definitely has like some of that like new metal-ish type stuff to them. Um, and they can bring out whoever they want just because they, especially at that point, they were, like they're just so big. And they're still so big. But the fact that they choose to they choose to devote energy and resources to like taking out these more extreme underground bands, like they don't have to do that. They could bring out some friggin' radio rock band if they wanted to. So props to them for kind of creating that next generation, taking out bands like Knocked Loose, taking out like even just bands like bands like us back in the day.
So my next question for you is, I know you're a police officer, correct? How'd that go down?
Well, after I toured, I was looking for a job, and it's something that I kind of considered for a long time, and never really got in trouble. I always wanted to be part of the solution, and I yeah, so I just I started applying, and I applied at a bunch of different agencies and a couple different states, and eventually landed where I'm at.
That's what's up, man. That's definitely what's up. Like, okay, so my next question is like, I know every vocalist is a little different. Like, how do you write lyrics? Like, you write in so many albums. Like, do you get in a certain mindset? Do you watch like horror movies, or do you just get in your own groove? And how do you come up with your material?
So I mean, it's obviously we're 16 years removed from like my last Red Chord album, and we're trying to put some stuff together now. Before it was a lot of it was just environmental. Like whatever you're doing at the time is what you're exposed to and what you're interested in. Um, I am not like a big like what well, I there's certain parameters and rules for red chord in my head, and it's like I mean technically like I could do whatever, but in my head there was always like we don't do political, we don't do relationships, we don't do like a lot of the run of the mill. I mean even back in the day we weren't going to do the unity hardcore, any of the stereotypical. Yeah, the genre stereotypes that came with being being a metal hardcore band. Um, Partially because like, we understood that like people are gonna have different opinions, and you're not like or we've never been like some band that's trying to like divide anybody based on we're just different people, and we're not trying to divide our crowds. So I always wanted to write something that was just different and hadn't really been done before. Proof of concept in the beginning of Red Chord, like the first song that we ever created was the Jar Full of Bunny Parts. It was kind of more the proof of concept where it was like it was the equivalent of like the dying fetus, like kill your mother, rape your dog, which is obviously not about killing anyone's mother and or raping any animals. I'm sure that they're animal lovers and mother lovers like we are. But we basically like we're combining like some degree of like humor uh with like an intensity, and from there it was like it was a lot of like writing little stories, like short stories of whatever was going on. The Fused Together is a little bit of an anomaly just in the respect that it was a glorified collection of demos from the entire beginning of the band. But when you get to a song like say Dreaming in Dog Years, where like that's kind of more in the lines of like where I think Red Chord kind of like went, where it's like, all right, yeah, it's a song about having a dream, like your dog having a dream and narrating what's going on in their head, not knowing the difference between the land of being awake and the land of being asleep, and then like looking at its owner and thinking that having this nightmare about being put to sleep, and it's just like I want lyrics to be somewhat thought provoking. And sometimes, like with some of these other records, like I didn't really get into like what it was that what it was that I meant from the lyrics until like long after, because I wanted somebody to, if somebody was actually going to take the time and read the lyrics, like I like the idea that like somebody would come to me and say like, hey, I like that you were, and they'd have it all wrong, but it's like, well, it's not that it's all wrong. It's that they took the time to like interpret something that was completely up for interpretation. Um, and that's just kind of, I'd rather write in like things that are double meanings and things that are thought provoking, and not try to club somebody over the head with like, this is my viewpoint, and like, you need to see it this way, because there's enough other bands that are doing that. And I didn't want to write about relationships, because I remember like my very first pre-Red Chord band, like I wrote a song about like some girl that I was, had broken up with, and you get over it. And then suddenly like you're singing the song and you're just like, I don't feel that way anymore. I don't care anymore. Like it's not timeless. So where we were just trying to do things that would be like, all right, I've never heard this before, and I didn't think about this before, and it's not a concept that's been like, kind of beaten to death, and That's really the only like rules, so to speak, that I've kind of like laid out.
That's definitely unique because like I definitely love listening to you guys. Like you're definitely an amazing lyricist. Like I
Thank
definitely
you.
like I don't try to take lyrics personally. Like you know what I'm saying? I'm one of those guys like I think Jamie Justice from Hatebreed said like that's why I listen to death metal because it takes you to your imagination to the unreal situations of life. Like you're not
Yeah, and the thing is like I like Jamie, like Jamie's like one of those guys that like clubs you over the head with like he's very good at giving you these like really inspiring lines. You know, like you like listen to like I mean the Hatebreed was a band that you know they predated us and like that Satisfaction is the Death of Desire. Uh, I mean that was definitely a heavily influenced in like my life in terms of just being like a hardcore kid. Um, and it's like you listen to that and you want to go to the show and you want to sing every word live. You want to go and like run faster and lift more weights and do like I mean it's like this super motivating sort of record and like it's exactly like what it was that I think he was setting out to do with that band. Um, you know, I just wanted to do something that was a little bit more gray where you weren't going to necessarily understand exactly what it was that I was talking about. I understand that not everybody is going to be like me and like read an album cover to cover. But for the people that were going to actually go, like, hey, I couldn't understand what you said, so I went back and I listened to it and I read it, and then like what the hell are you talking about? Like, whose toast is this? You know, on the whole client's record, like, you know, it's like, you know, you read it. Well, you tell me what you think, and then you know, years later, it was like, okay, yeah, I'll tell you, I met this guy and he, whatever, and it was kind of like making a cartoon character and then like basically making like the Black Santa and the Ant-Man and the Upper Decker character and stuff like that were people that I had met that told me some sort of story. They were definitely like an underspoken sort of class of people that gets kind of ignored and had lots of stuff to say, and then I basically supersized them into these like you know Godzilla type monsters, and they were like in this like weird fantasy world, and but they were just people that I was interacting with, and some of the stuff was things that they loosely described and then got really heavily like embellished, and you know it's just you definitely I like the imagination aspect. I don't think you're gonna necessarily see any red chord like horror movie songs. I as much as I like horror movies, as much as the next guy, like there's already a Cannibal Corpse and they've got, you know, 20 different records or whatever. Like they can do whatever they want with horror, and I don't think that I'm gonna like reinvent the wheel.
that's fair. Like I definitely understand that. Like extreme music, I'm just glad like everything like everybody has their own unique taste of how they write. Like I that's how why I love doing what I do, like to get to know you guys, like how you get inside your head, how you guys write the songs you guys come up with and what it means to you and everything.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and there's bands that like you know, there's bands like Dead Guy or Turmoil, you know, who they were definitely influences on me and some of the early Red Chord stuff, where they were like some of the more hardcore facing stuff that was like making its way. Buried Alive, so, the sound wise was like making its way into you know, besides Hatebreed, like Buried Alive was like a real heavy, big influence on us at that point. But these like chaotic, like metal, hardcore bands, I love the Tim Singer from Dead Guys lyrics. It's not like as vague or whatever as say like my stuff is, but it clubs you over the head in a different way. And like his lines are so big, and it's like he's talking about stuff like uh, pins and needles was like the huge like introduction for me in like Dead Guy, and it was like you know when you hear him like screaming about the 9 to 5 lifestyle at work, that and that's just the first song that's kind of come into my head with this, but like you can relate to that and it's like he sounds like the angriest person in the world. So I didn't necessarily want to always sound like I like the idea of being able to sound like a Frank Mullen suffocation monster, but I also like the idea of sounding like a real angry person, like your dad screaming at you like in the most like pissed off way, and like that's where like that Tim Singer hardcore sort of influence kind of came from, where you could just tell somebody is like just angry at reality, and like they're just hearing like the gritted teeth and unhinged nature.
Oh yeah. So my next question is, how's it feel like after being gone for so many years? I know you guys play a lot of one-off shows. How's it feel being back on stage after so long?
It's good. I mean, I think that we've exhausted our welcome to some degree, where we really need to get something new together, and not just be juicing. Like everything that we're doing from here has to have some degree of a purpose. Like so the shows last year were promoting the reissue of Fused Together on vinyl. The shows this year are themed around doing clients on vinyl. Uh, but I don't think that we're necessarily like, I don't think Pray for Eyes is going to get that same thing. This song's on Pray for Eyes. I don't think that we've ever even like played live, and I don't know that we're going to like go out of our way to do that. So, this is kind of like a pretty specific moment in history where it's like moving forward. I don't think you're going to see these. There's going to be no more like drop from the sky red chord stuff until we actually have something new in hand. Otherwise, it'll just fade into an obscurity and get out of the way, and like let the real bands, do it. I'm hoping that we actually have some new stuff to support, but no more random one-offs on the other side of the world.
Awesome. I don't have any more questions for you. I greatly appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Oh
Thanks for
yeah, like
caring.
I know Sebastian from Dripping, he said you guys are the most lovely guys in the world.
Well, thanks. Yeah, he's a good dude, and like I said, it's awesome. I think that there's like a certain it's flattering that people have like gone back in time and sensationalized like some of this stuff from back in the day, like these drippings and mortal decays and stuff. I think Devin is great because he's got a cool audience that's like looking at him, and it's amazing that like he's choosing to put a spotlight on some of this stuff, because again, he could do a spotlight on anything. He's got a lot of influence and stuff with these younger people. But even like back in the day, like red cord and dripping and all this stuff, we were pretty underground. There was a pretty specific niche of people that would come out to these shows, and it was not like in droves. I love the fact that I'm able to do this, you know, as a middle-aged guy, and I love the fact that there's like an interest in that allows us the ability to like go back on stage. And I mean, it's definitely tougher. Like physically, it's a lot tougher than it was when I was 19 years old. But I still feel like in our 40s, we're still physically capable. We're not like we're not using walkers or any of that stuff yet.
Oh yeah, like Devin is definitely in so many projects. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like I've been on like that Metal Archive website, like I said, and that man's in so many projects. I was like, holy shit, how's he have time for all that?
Yeah, I mean it's exciting. Like it's exciting that he's going full bore for it, and I mean in sanguisugabogg and in Devin's case, I feel like they're getting better. Like his voice is getting better and it's more powerful, and it's like really exciting because like I look at what those guys are doing, and I like we've obviously been doing this we've been doing this like tour throwback series and like digging up like some old like camcorder footage and stuff. And it was like we were that band like back in the day. We were just like at one point it was around like 2003, 2004. We were playing too many shows to take it part time. So it was like, well, what are we gonna do? Are we gonna like we're all gonna get fired if we keep taking the time off? Are we willing to like just kind of walk away from our jobs and just keep playing and playing and playing? And at that point, especially, it was like you start realizing that like practice makes you better. It's like, well, okay, cool. Like I can sing all the time and I can practice all the time and I can work out all the time. And, it's definitely, it's nice to like look at like what some of these bands are doing and just kind of like remember where I was at that age. And they're big props to them, props to 200 Stab Wounds, props to like a lot of these like young bands. Full of Hell, like those guys have been around for a minute now, and it's like they just keep getting faster and crazier and wilder and sounding better. And it's kind of funny when you start stumbling into like if I go to a local show and you start kind of seeing the like new generation of that, like the bands that want to be Full of Hell, the bands that want to be sanguisugabogg, like so they're already out there and they're already influencing that. Now when those bands kind of come into their own, like we'll see like what happens, like what the next wave of this stuff is. It's very similar to like, Red Chord might have had been a couple years ahead of the curve in some of this stuff, but Suicide Silence, Job for a Cowboy, all this stuff, they kind of like blew it up a little bit and they made it kind of like a little bit cooler because they were closer to the kids' ages. And I mean, like there's definitely like a shelf life where you sort of like age out and you have to kind of make corrections. Um, but yeah, I'm really kind of curious to see like what the next generation is going to look like when you have Lorna Shore sounding the way that they do and Sanguisugabogg and all that stuff. Like, what's the like? How extreme are we going to get here moving forward?
Oh yeah, if
Um,
there's a local band I can suggest to you, they're from where I'm from. They're called 12 Gauge Autopsy.
okay.
It's a three-piece band, and it's like a younger version of Dying Fetus already.
And where are you from?
I'm from Davenport, Iowa.
Okay. 12 gauge autopsy.
Oh yeah, then like Intigment, like we got so many younger bands coming out of here, like Intigment, Phantom Threat, Rot Pile.
Yeah, I mean, dude, fire me some of those names in a message, and I'll definitely check it out. And it's just exciting because, like, I mean, everything is about young kids, and it's always been about that. Like we were 19, and like the first tour that we did, I turned 21 on the last day of that like 2 week tour. We'd already been a band for a couple of years. I remember like interacting with we played a show with Stick to Your Guns like way back in the day in a pizza shop basement with like As Blood Runs Black and bands like that. And like I just remember those guys being like so young, and it's like they were kind of like the future of that like metallic hardcore. Like they were taking it in a certain direction. Now it's like, I mean, those dudes are, those dudes are, not terribly far off of our age. And Chris and dude from Evergreen, Josh, I mean, they're definitely like guys from Walls of Jericho and from like Evergreen Terrace and stuff like that joined up with Stick to Your Guns, and now it's like it's just interesting to like watch the young bands become the old bands, and and it's exciting to see what's going to happen next, and it's also really exciting to see some of these bands that never stopped, like Whitechapel. They never went away. They evolved, and now like they're kind of like at the top of the food chain, all doing it on their own terms. Like, could not be cooler.
Oh yeah. Well, I appreciate it, boss.
All right, man. Yeah, fire me those band names, and I'll check it out.
For sure.
All right, bud. Thanks.
Yep.
Later.
Later.
The Wild